My name is Helen Chin. For most of my life, that name has been a quiet engine, humming beneath the surface of things, powerful but rarely seen. I was born to parents who taught me that the greatest strength was not in being the loudest voice in the room, but in being the most prepared mind. They were scholars, people of books and quiet contemplation, who raised me in the gentle, fog-kissed hills of the Northern California coast, in a home that smelled of old paper and eucalyptus. They gave me a love for logic, for the elegant certainty of a well-written line of code, and a deep-seated belief that one's work should speak for itself. It was a philosophy that served me well as I built a life and a company, Chin Global Technologies, from the ground up, turning a garage startup into a leader in aerospace and medical innovation. But there is a world where work does not speak for itself, a world where legacy is not what you build, but what you inherit. And it was into that world that my only daughter, Lisa, had chosen to step, drawn by a love that I had watched, with a quiet and growing ache in my heart, slowly begin to dim the brilliant light within her. The first time I was truly mistaken for the help, it wasn't an accident. It was a statement. The rehearsal dinner for Lisa and Bradley Huntington III was being held at the Rosebrook Country Club, a place so steeped in old money its foundations seemed to rest on a bedrock of inherited arrogance. The grand ballroom glittered, a riot of crystal and silver under a setting sun that painted the manicured golf course in shades of apricot and gold. I had chosen my attire with care, a simple, impeccably tailored black dress from a designer whose name was a whisper among those who understood craftsmanship, not a shout for those who only saw logos. It was a dress of quiet confidence, a reflection of the woman I had always tried to be. The wedding coordinator, a woman with a severe blonde bob and an expression of perpetual stress, didn't even look up from her tablet as I entered the ballroom. "The staff entrance is around the back," she said, her voice clipped. "All service personnel are required to use the service corridors." Before I could form a reply, my daughter, Lisa, was hurrying toward me, her own beautiful dress, a pale, shimmering blue, looking somehow like a costume on her. There was a tension in her shoulders that had become her constant companion over the past year. "Mom," her voice was a breath of relief, tinged with anxiety. "You made it." The coordinator's head snapped up. Her eyes, wide and apologetic, finally took me in. "Oh, Mrs. Chen. I am so terribly sorry. I didn't realize." "It's perfectly all right," I said softly, my attention drawn to the arrival of the Huntington clan. They swept into the room not as guests, but as conquerors surveying their domain. They didn't own the club, of course. I did. A quiet acquisition from a few years prior, part of a real estate portfolio that had seemed a sensible diversification at the time. Margaret Huntington, the family matriarch, a woman whose face was a testament to the finest work of Park Avenue's most discreet surgeons, honed in on my daughter. Her voice, thin and sharp, could have etched glass. "Lisa, darling, where is the champagne? We've been here for 5 minutes. This is a rehearsal dinner, not a dry run for disappointment." Lisa's posture stiffened. It was a familiar sight, this slow erosion of her confidence under the acidic drip of the Huntingtons' expectations. I had watched my bright, fierce daughter, the one who had graduated top of her MBA class, who had argued politics and philosophy with me over dinner since she was a teenager, begin to shrink herself to fit into the narrow confines of their world. "I'll go check with the staff, Margaret," Lisa started to say, but Margaret's gaze had already shifted, landing on me with dismissive appraisal. "Are you with the catering company?" she demanded, not of me, but in my general direction. "We require more champagne." "The Krug Grand Cuvée," I specified. Not that domestic swill they were attempting to serve in the foyer. I felt a smile touch the corners of my lips, a flicker of private amusement. I thought of the rolling hills of Champagne, France, where a small, historic vineyard the Chin family had acquired now aged that very Krug. Another detail the Huntingtons had no reason to know. "Mother," Lisa began, her cheeks flushed with a shame that was not hers to bear. I placed a gentle hand on her arm, the fabric of her dress cool beneath my fingers. "It's all right, sweetheart," I murmured. "I'll see to the champagne." Just then, Bradley Huntington III materialized at his mother's side. He looked, as he always did, like a man playing the part of himself, perfectly tailored, handsome, and deeply, profoundly uncomfortable. "Lisa," he said, avoiding my eyes. "Father needs to speak with you. It's about the adjustments to the prenup." I watched my daughter's face, a canvas where I could read every fleeting emotion. "Adjustments?" she asked, her voice small. "Just some minor clauses," Bradley said, waving a dismissive hand. "Standard protections for family assets." His lawyers are insisting. Of course they are, I murmured, almost to myself. I thought of the prenup my own legal team had drafted months ago, a document of formidable, ironclad protections for Lisa's inheritance, her trust fund, yes, but more importantly, her shares in Chin Global. It was a document designed to protect her from exactly this kind of predatory adjustment. Margaret was still looking at me, her foot tapping an impatient rhythm on the polished parquet floor. Well, the champagne? Right away, I said, my voice smooth and placid. I turned and began to walk toward the service doors. As I did, I heard Bradley's sister, Cordelia, a younger, sharper-edged version of her mother, whisper to Lisa in a voice designed to carry, "Darling, you absolutely must have a word with the help about their attire. That woman's dress is so clearly above her station. It must be a knockoff." The kitchen was an oasis of calm efficiency, a stark contrast to the performative drama of the ballroom. Michael, the catering supervisor, a man whose competence I had noted and admired on previous visits, looked up from his clipboard, his expression harried. "Mrs. Chin," he said, his eyes widening. "We weren't expecting you in here. Is everything all right?" "The champagne service is arranged, I assure you." "Everything is fine, Michael," I said with a reassuring smile. "It seems I've been temporarily reassigned to drink duty." I walked over to the chilled wine stores and selected a bottle of Krug. But not the one they were expecting. I chose a bottle from the private reserve vintage. Michael saw the label and a knowing grin spread across his face. "The 98. The one we only serve to people who can actually tell the difference." I arranged a set of delicate flutes on a silver tray. "How are they treating your team tonight?" I asked quietly. He shrugged, his professionalism a thin veil over his weariness. "Like we're part of the furniture. Invisible. It's standard for this crowd." "Not for much longer," I promised him, my voice soft but firm. When I returned to the ballroom, Bradley Huntington II, the patriarch, was holding court by the grand marble fireplace, a smug, self-satisfied look on his face. My daughter stood before him, looking like a student called to the principal's office. "There's no need to be so sentimental about this, Lisa," he was saying in a patronizing tone. "It's simply good business to protect assets that have been in the Huntington family for generations." I could hear the tremor in Lisa's voice as she replied. "But the clause about my shares, it feels." "Your mother's modest little investments are of no real concern to us," he said, waving a dismissive hand as if swatting away a fly. "I'm sure she did the very best she could with whatever savings she managed to put away over the years. A commendable effort for someone of her background." I glided forward, the silver tray balanced perfectly in my hands. "Krug Grand Cuvée," I announced, my voice even and calm, as requested. Margaret snatched a flute from the tray without a glance in my direction. Finally, she huffed. "One can't expect efficiency from temporary staff, I suppose." She then turned to her husband. "Bradley, we really must speak to Lisa about downsizing, her mother's role in the wedding itself. It's a matter of the photographs, you understand. Appearances are so important in our circle." I watched my daughter's face. I saw the flash of pain, the slight crumpling around her eyes. And in that moment, I saw her not as the poised MBA graduate, but as the little girl who used to sit on my lap, her eyes wide with wonder, as I explained the orbital mechanics for a satellite we were launching. The teenager who spent her summers as an intern at CHT, not because she had to, but because she wanted to understand every facet of the business I had built. The determined young woman who had insisted on earning her own way, on building her own reputation, refusing to be seen as just the heiress to my fortune. And I saw how this family was trying to methodically strip all of that away, to replace her hard-won identity with their hollow version of pedigree. "Mr. Huntington," I said quietly, offering him the tray. "Your champagne." He took a glass without turning his full attention to me. Yes, thank you." "Now, Lisa, about those shares your mother passed on to you. From that little tech company she was involved with. In the grand scheme of things, their value is quite negligible next to Bradley's inheritance. We feel it's for the best if we simply fold them into the Huntington family portfolio. For simplicity's sake." Lisa's voice, though still quiet, found a new thread of steel. "Those shares are not from a little tech company. They are my inheritance." Cordelia let out a brittle laugh. "What, from some little startup in a garage? How quaint." I cleared my throat, a small sound that seemed to cut through the hum of conversation. "Actually," I said, my voice carrying with newfound clarity, "those shares are in a company called Chin Global Technologies, CHT. Its current market capitalization is approximately $47 billion. The silence that descended upon the ballroom was absolute. It was a silence so profound you could hear the clink of ice in a distant glass, the soft sigh of the air conditioning. Bradley Huntington too turned, slowly, as if his neck were stiff. His eyes, for the first time, focused on me. Really focused. "What did you say?" he asked, his voice strained. "Chin global." Lisa, beside him, was beginning to stand a little taller. A spark I hadn't seen in months was returning to her eyes. "You might know it better by the name of its primary division," I continued, my voice as smooth as the wine I was serving. "CGT Aerospace Systems. We currently hold the primary contract for the navigation and guidance software for NASA's Artemis program. Or perhaps you're more familiar with our Medical Innovations division. It's the one that just completed the acquisition of a company called Huntington Medical. The deal closed last month." The champagne flute slipped from Margaret Huntington's perfectly manicured fingers. It hit the marble floor with a sharp, explosive sound, shattering into 1,000 glittering shards. "Mom," Lisa said, and for the first time all evening, a genuine smile touched her lips. "I think they finally recognize you." The silence in the ballroom had curdled into something thick and suffocating. Bradley II's face, which was usually a mask of aristocratic nonchalance, had cycled through disbelief, confusion, and was now settling on a shade of choleric red. Margaret's voice was a reedy whisper. "You're Helen Chin." Lisa stepped forward, moving to stand beside me, a subtle shift that felt like a reclaiming of territory. "Actually, it's Dr. Helen Chin," she said, her voice clear and strong now. "PhD in computer science from MIT. MBA from Stanford." She shot a cool look at the Huntingtons. "Though you would have known that if you'd bothered to do a simple Google search instead of making assumptions based on her last name." Bradley III, looking utterly bewildered, took a half step toward Lisa. "But, Lisa, your mother." "I thought she was, he trailed off, flustered, unable to articulate the cloud of assumptions he'd been living under. I raised a single, questioning eyebrow. "Please, Bradley, do finish that thought. I'm genuinely curious which particular prejudice you were about to land on. That I'm working class? Uneducated? Simply, not one of you." The red in Bradley II's face deepened. He finally found his voice, a blustering, indignant roar. "Now see here. This is some kind of elaborate deception. A trick. A trick?" I asked, my voice still quiet, which only seemed to enrage him further. I carefully set the silver tray down on a nearby table. "Are you referring to the trick of trying to swindle my daughter out of her shares through a deceptively worded prenup? Or perhaps you mean the trick of leveraging your son's engagement to gain preferential terms in your merger negotiations with my company?" His face went from red to a startling, waxy white. How could you possibly know about those negotiations?" "They were private. Between our board and your people." A small, knowing smile played on my lips. "I am my people, Mr. Huntington. I am the CEO. I was on the other end of those video calls, listening to you pontificate about your company's supposed strengths. And as for how I know about your private strategy sessions," I paused. "I own the building where your corporate offices are located. The evening cleaning crew is remarkably observant. And loyal." Cordelia let out a sound that was half gasp, half strangled laugh. "This is absurd. Daddy, tell them this is completely absurd." "Oh, it gets more absurd," Lisa added, her confidence growing with every word. She was my daughter again, sharp and brilliant. "Mom, why don't you show them your phone?" I drew my phone from my small evening bag. It was a CGT prototype, its sleek, seamless design not yet available to the public. With a few taps on the screen, I brought up a video file. I turned the phone so the screen was facing them. It was security footage, crisp and clear, from the Huntington Medical boardroom. Bradley II's voice, tinny but unmistakable, echoed from the phone's powerful speaker into the stunned silence of the ballroom. "Once the marriage is secure, we'll have a direct line into Chen Global's R&D. Lisa will be a Huntington. Her loyalties will shift. The old woman won't see it coming until it's too late." Margaret gripped her husband's arm, her knuckles white. "Turn that off. Turn that off this instant." "Why?" I asked mildly. "We're just getting to the part where you discuss the best way to manage your new daughter-in-law, to ensure she understands her place in the family and doesn't get any independent ideas." Bradley III turned to Lisa, his face ashen, his handsome features twisted in a mask of desperation. "Lisa, baby, I didn't know about any of this. I swear I had no idea." Lisa's gaze was unflinching. "Didn't know?" she asked, her voice cracking with the pain of a year's worth of small betrayals coalescing into one massive wound. "Or didn't want to know, Bradley?" All those times you told me I was being difficult about the prenup? All those conversations where you pressured me to prove my commitment to our future? Was this the future you meant? I love you, he whispered, the words sounding hollow and rehearsed. No, Lisa straightened her spine, and I saw the woman I had raised, resilient and proud. You loved the idea of me. You loved the prize. Access to the technology your family so desperately needed to stay afloat. She took a deep breath. And I think, somewhere deep down, you loved that you thought you were better than me, that your family was rescuing me from a common background. Didn't you? He had no answer. The other guests, once a scattered collection of conversations, had now formed a silent, watchful circle around us. Smartphones were held up discreetly, their small red recording lights like malevolent eyes in the dimming ballroom. Tomorrow's society blogs would be ablaze. This is an outrage. Bradley too bellowed, trying to regain control. We are the Huntingtons. Our name has been in the Forbes 500 for 3 generations. Was in the Forbes 500, I corrected him gently. Until the end of the last fiscal quarter. A fact your quarterly reports conveniently obscured with some very creative accounting. Which is why you needed this merger so badly. Why you rushed this engagement. Understanding dawned on Lisa's face, followed by a wave of nausea. The sudden rush to set a date, the constant pressure. Mom. She turned to me. Did they know their company was failing when Bradley proposed to me? They knew, I confirmed, my voice full of a quiet sadness for my daughter's pain. And I knew as well. I just didn't realize the lengths they were willing to go to, using their own son and my daughter as pawns in a corporate chess game. Margaret, ever the pragmatist, switched tactics. She stepped forward, her expression morphing into one of pained sincerity. Helen, she said, her voice now a placating coo. Surely we are all reasonable people here. We can discuss this. Family to family. Lisa let out a short, bitter laugh. Family? Do you mean like when you instructed the club staff that my mother couldn't possibly be a member and should be directed to the tradesman's entrance? Or do you mean like tonight, when you assumed she was the hired help and assigned her to serve drinks at her own daughter's rehearsal dinner? Bradley III reached for Lisa's hand, a desperate, pleading gesture. Lisa, please. We can fix this. We can start over. Lisa pulled her hand away as if she had been burned. No, Bradley. We can't. With a steady, deliberate movement, she slipped the enormous diamond engagement ring from her finger. The stone, which had once seemed to me a beautiful but heavy weight on her hand, now looked garish and cold. She held it out to him. I believe this belongs to your family. Though, you might want to have it appraised. I suspect its value, much like your family's honor, has been significantly overstated. As for the business side of things, I cut in, my voice crisp and professional. The acquisition of Huntington Medical will proceed. My board approved the final terms this afternoon, at a price reflecting your company's actual, rather bleak, financial reality. Your shareholders will be notified in the morning. Bradley II's phone and then Margaret's and then Cordelia's began to buzz and chime in a frantic chorus. The news was already breaking. The Huntington Empire, built on a century of smoke and mirrors, was dissolving in the time it took to serve a glass of champagne. You planned this. Margaret accused, her voice rising to a shrill shriek. You orchestrated this whole humiliation. No, Margaret, you misunderstand, I said, looking at her not with anger, but with a kind of weary pity. You orchestrated this. You and your family. You did this with every condescending glance, every dismissive word, every time you judged a person's worth by their perceived station instead of their character. I simply provided the stage and let you perform your roles. Lisa linked her arm through mine, a simple gesture of solidarity that felt like a homecoming. Ready to go, Mom? She asked, her voice light. I think I've had quite enough of high society for one lifetime. Actually, I said, my gaze shifting to Michael, the catering supervisor, who was watching from the kitchen doorway with an expression of pure, unadulterated joy. I thought we might stay for a while. After all, I smiled, I brought the good champagne. I raised my voice so that it carried through the stunned ballroom. Michael, would you and your staff do me the honor of joining us for a toast? And I'd like to extend that invitation to anyone else here who has ever been made to feel small or invisible by the Huntington family. The bar is open, and I believe we have something to celebrate. A remarkable thing happened. The carefully constructed social pyramid of the Rosebrook Country Club inverted. The servers, the busboys, the valets who had been lingering outside, even some of the club's junior members who had been snubbed by the Huntingtons for years, began to move forward. A murmur grew into a buzz, and then into laughter. Michael and his team emerged from the kitchen, no longer invisible, their faces lit with smiles. He came over to me, holding a freshly opened bottle of the Reserve Krug. "Dr. Chen," he said, his voice full of respect. "It would be our honor." The Huntingtons, now utterly irrelevant in a room that was suddenly, vibrantly alive, seemed to shrink. They gathered their things and fled, not with a bang, but with a whimper, their manufactured prestige evaporating into the warm, celebratory air. Lisa watched them go, a complex expression on her face. "You know what this means, don't you?" she said, turning back to me with a wry grin. "I'm officially unemployed. The senior VP position at Huntington Medical that was part of the deal doesn't seem quite so appealing anymore." "Funny you should mention that," I said, reaching into my evening bag and pulling out a slim, elegant envelope. "The new Chen Huntington Medical Division will have to work on a better name, is in need of a new director. Someone with integrity. Someone who understands the business, but more importantly, understands the people it's meant to serve. The interview committee meets next week. I expect you to be prepared." She raised an eyebrow, the old, familiar spark of playful defiance back in her eyes. "An interview? No nepotism? No fast track for the founder's daughter?" I scoffed gently. "Please. You're a Chen. You will be held to a higher standard than anyone else. You will have to work twice as hard and be twice as good to earn your place." I softened, my expression turning into a mother's proud smile. "Just as you always have." As the impromptu party swirled around us, a joyous, chaotic mix of evening gowns and waiters' uniforms, Lisa wrapped her arms around me in a fierce hug. "I'm sorry, Mom," she whispered into my shoulder. "I'm so sorry for ever letting them make me feel ashamed. For not standing up to them, and for you sooner." I held my daughter close, stroking her hair. "Oh, my darling girl," I murmured, my heart full. "There is nothing to forgive. Growth is not a straight line. Sometimes we have to walk down the wrong path to truly appreciate the right one. You didn't stand up sooner because you were learning. And tonight, you didn't just stand up. You found your footing on solid ground." I gestured to the room, to the happy, mingling crowd. "And now you know who your people are. Not them. Us." "A Chen woman," she said, her voice thick with emotion but strong. She pulled back, wiping a tear from her eye, her smile radiant. "Though I have to say, next time we dismantle a corrupt family dynasty, can we maybe try for a little less public drama?" I laughed, a warm, genuine sound of pure joy. "And where would the fun be in that?" I asked, taking a freshly poured glass of champagne from a passing tray. "Besides, my love, someone has to keep reminding the world that a person's value is not measured by their pedigree, but by their principles. It might as well be us." And with that, we raised our glasses. Mother and daughter, standing together in the wreckage of a broken engagement and the foundation of a new beginning. The crystal flutes, filled with champagne from our own vineyards, chimed together in a toast. Not to revenge, but to revelation. To the quiet, unshakable strength of knowing who you are, and the profound, liberating joy of finally being seen.